They reported me to the HOA almost every single week. So eventually, I did the only thing that made sense at the time. I became the HOA president, and I made sure they finally had to live under the same rules they weaponized against everyone else. And yeah, I'm not proud of everything that happened next, but I'll let you decide if I went too far. When I first moved into Willow Creek Estates, it felt like one of those rare places that hadn't been completely ruined by overbearing rules or nosy neighbors. It was quiet, trees lining the streets, kids riding bikes in the afternoon, people actually waving when you drove by. The HOA existed, sure, but it was more of a background thing, $60 a month, basic stuff. Keep your lawn trimmed, don't leave trash bins out all week. Don't turn your front yard into a used car lot. Nothing crazy. I'd been there about 5 years without a single issue, not one complaint, not one warning letter, nothing. I worked from home, kept to myself mostly, had a small circle of neighbors I'd chat with, Marcus across the street, Linda 2 houses down, and occasionally Mrs. Alvarez who'd bring over tamales during the holidays. It was the kind of place where things just worked. And then the Harpers moved in. Elliot and Susan Harper, mid-60s, recently retired, came from somewhere up north, I think Connecticut or maybe New Jersey. Honestly, it didn't matter. What mattered was the energy they brought with them, the kind of energy that quietly changes a neighborhood without anyone realizing it until it's too late. At first, they seemed normal enough. Elliot waved a lot, smiled too long, the kind of smile that doesn't quite reach the eyes. Susan was quieter, but always watching, always noticing things, like she was mentally cataloging every detail around her. I didn't think much of it. People move in, they take time to adjust, no big deal. 3 weeks later, I got my first letter. It was from the HOA, stamped and official looking, folded neatly like it carried some kind of weight. I opened it standing in my kitchen, expecting maybe a notice about upcoming maintenance or something routine, but instead it said I had received a warning for leaving my trash bins visible from the street on a non-designated day. Now, here's the thing, it was trash day. I remember just standing there, rereading the letter like maybe I missed something, like there was a second page that explained the logic. But no, just a warning, polite but firm, the kind of tone that says, this is your first strike. I shrugged it off, figured maybe it was a mistake, maybe someone filed it late or the HOA just processed it wrong. Annoying, sure, but not worth losing sleep over. A week later, another letter. This one said my lawn exceeded the maximum height requirement, 3 inches. So I went outside, grabbed a ruler from my desk, crouched down in my own yard like a lunatic, and measured it. 2.7 inches. I checked 3 different spots, just to be sure, 2.8 at most. And that's when something shifted, just slightly, just enough for me to feel it in the back of my mind. Like, okay, this isn't random anymore. I asked Marcus about it that evening, caught him while he was taking his dog out, and he just kind of laughed, but not in a funny way, more like the kind of laugh you do when something's already bothering you. Let me guess, he said. Anonymous complaint? Yeah. He nodded, looked over toward the Harper's house, without saying anything for a second. You're not the only one. That's when I started paying attention. The third complaint came the following week. Apparently, my car had been parked overnight on the street, which wasn't allowed unless you had prior approval. The problem was, it wasn't my car. A friend of mine had come by for dinner, stayed a little late, left around midnight, and somehow, that turned into a formal complaint. 3 in 3 weeks. All anonymous. All petty. All technically within the rules, but just off. And once you start noticing something like that, you can't unsee it. I began spotting Elliot more often, standing on his front porch early in the morning, coffee in one hand, binoculars in the other. Not even trying to hide it, just slowly scanning the street like he was on some kind of self-appointed patrol. At first, I told myself I was overthinking it. I mean, who actually does that, right? But then one morning, around 6, I couldn't sleep, so I got up, made some coffee, walked over to the window, and there he was. Same spot, same posture, binoculars raised. And this time, he had a notepad. He'd look, pause, write something down, look again, like he was documenting evidence for a case nobody asked him to build. I just stood there watching him for a minute, not even trying to hide it. And at some point, he lowered the binoculars, looked directly toward my house, and gave this small, satisfied nod, like we both understood something now. That was the moment it stopped being annoying and started feeling personal. I went to the next HOA meeting that month, something I had never bothered with before, because honestly, why would I? Things had always been fine. The meeting was held in this small community clubhouse, folding chairs, stale coffee, a handful of residents flipping through printed agendas, and at the front was the HOA president, Daniel Reeves, who had apparently been running things for nearly a decade. He had that kind of presence, not loud, not aggressive, but comfortable, like someone who hadn't been challenged in a very long time. When it was my turn to speak, I kept it simple, explained the complaints, the frequency, the pattern, the fact that they didn't line up with reality. I wasn't angry, not yet, just confused, maybe a little frustrated. Daniel listened, nodded occasionally, then leaned back in his chair and said, "Complaints are anonymous for a reason. We have to take each one seriously." "That's it?" I asked. "That's policy." I remember looking around the room, expecting someone else to chime in, to say, "Yeah, this seems off," but most people just avoided eye contact, like they'd already learned something I hadn't. After the meeting, Linda caught up with me outside. "They've been doing that for months," she said quietly. "The Harpers?" She nodded. "They reported me for a wreath last July, said it violated seasonal guidelines. There is no rule about wreaths." I just stared at her for a second. "So why doesn't anyone do anything?" She gave me this look, not angry, not defeated, just tired. "Because the system lets them." And that was the first time I realized this wasn't just about a couple of complaints. This was about control. And the people in charge weren't interested in stopping it. If anything, they were protecting it. And that's when I started thinking, if the system is the problem, maybe the only way to fix it is from the inside. Once that idea got into my head, it didn't really leave. It just kind of sat there, growing quietly, connecting dots I hadn't paid attention to before, like why certain people never spoke up at meetings, or why the same handful of names kept coming up in conversations whispered in driveways and over fences. It wasn't just the Harpers. They were just the most visible symptom of something deeper, something baked into how the HOA had been running for years. I didn't jump into anything right away. I wish I could say I had some master plan from the start, but honestly, it was messier than that. It started with me just showing up more. Every meeting, every agenda, sitting in the back at first, just listening. You learn a lot when you stop assuming things are normal. I started noticing how Daniel ran those meetings, how quickly he'd move past certain topics, how he'd shut down questions with phrases like, "That's already been addressed," or "We'll review that internally," which basically meant nothing was going to happen, and people just accepted it, not because they agreed, but because it felt pointless to push. One night, about a month into this, a guy named Trevor spoke up about a fine he got for having a basketball hoop visible from the street. His kids had left it out overnight. "It's a portable hoop," he said, clearly frustrated. "There's nothing in the rules about it needing to be stored every single night." Daniel didn't even look at him. "Section 4.2, he replied, flipping a page like he'd done it 100 times, "visual clutter. It falls under that." Trevor just stood there for a second, then sat back down. No discussion, no vote, just done. And that stuck with me, because I had started reading the bylaws by then, all 48 pages of them, late at night, sitting at my kitchen table with a highlighter like I was cramming for some kind of exam I didn't sign up for. And Section 4.2 didn't say that. Not even close. That was the moment things sharpened. Because now it wasn't just annoying neighbors or unfair complaints. It was selective enforcement, vague interpretations, rules being bent depending on who they were applied to. And once you see that, you can't unsee it. So I kept reading. I went through everything: enforcement procedures, complaint protocols, board member terms, voting requirements, and buried in all of that were things that, frankly, shouldn't have been ignored. Like the fact that HOA board members were only allowed to serve a maximum of 6 consecutive years. Daniel had been president for 9. Or that any expense over $500 required a board vote. There were at least 3 recent projects approved without one. Small things on their own, but together, they painted a picture. Not corruption in some dramatic, movie-style sense, just complacency, power settling in, rules becoming flexible for the people enforcing them. And the more I looked into it, the more it became clear the system wasn't broken. It was working exactly how it had been allowed to. I started documenting everything. Dates, sections, screenshots of emails, photos when I could get them. I wasn't trying to be sneaky about it. but I also wasn't announcing it either. I just kept gathering, piece by piece, until I had something solid. Around that time, I talked to a lawyer. Not to sue. I already knew I couldn't afford that. He confirmed it anyway. Said cases like this could drag on for months, maybe years, easily costing $10,000, $15,000 before you even saw a result. But he did say something that stuck. If the bylaws are on your side, he told me, you don't need a courtroom, you need a vote. And that was it. That was the shift. Because suddenly, this wasn't about defending myself anymore. It was about changing who got to make the decisions in the first place. The next HOA meeting felt different before it even started. Maybe it was just me. Maybe it was the fact that I knew what I was walking in with. But there was this tension in the air, like something was about to happen, even if no one else realized it yet. When the floor opened for new business, I stood up. No notes. No speech prepared. Just clarity. I'd like to address a concern regarding board compliance with our own bylaws, I said, keeping my voice steady. That got Daniel's attention. He leaned forward slightly, not defensive yet, but alert. I laid it out simply: term limits, unapproved expenses, the sections they violated. I wasn't accusing, I wasn't raising my voice, just stating facts, one after another. For a second, the room was quiet. Then Daniel smiled. Not warmly, just controlled. I think there may be some misunderstanding of how those provisions are applied, he said. Then let's clarify it, I replied. And that's when I said it. Per section 2.7, I'm calling for a vote of no confidence. You could feel the shift immediately. Chairs creaking, people looking up from their papers, that low murmur that spreads when something unexpected cuts through routine. Daniel straightened in his chair. That's not something we're entertaining tonight, he said, a little sharper now. It is if I have the required signatures, I said, and placed the folder on the table in front of him. 27 signatures. More than enough. And here's the thing. Those signatures didn't come from nowhere. Over the past few weeks, I'd been knocking on doors, not campaigning, not asking for votes yet, just talking to people, hearing their stories, their frustrations, the fines that didn't make sense, the complaints that felt targeted. And it turned out, a lot of people had been waiting for someone to do exactly this. Daniel flipped through the pages, slower now, his confidence still there, but thinner. This will be reviewed, he said. It has to be voted on, I replied. Silence again. Then someone in the back, Marcus, actually, spoke up. He's right. And that was all it took. Because once one person breaks that silence, it gets easier for others. Linda nodded. Trevor raised his hand again. Even Mrs. Alvarez, who almost never spoke at meetings, said quietly, we should vote. And just like that, the momentum shifted. The vote wasn't that night. It couldn't be, not officially, but it was scheduled for the following month. And for the first time since I'd started all of this, Daniel looked unsure. That month felt longer than it should have. Because now it wasn't just about removing someone, it was about what came next. People started asking me if I was going to run. At first, I said no. I mean, that wasn't the plan, right? I just wanted things to be fair again, not to take over the whole thing. But the more I thought about it, the more it made sense. Because if I didn't step in, someone else would, and there was no guarantee they'd do anything differently. So yeah, I ran. Not with some big campaign or slogans or anything like that, just conversations. Knocking on doors again, but this time being honest about what I wanted to change. Transparency, consistent enforcement, no more anonymous complaints hiding behind the system, just basic accountability. Some people were skeptical. A few asked if I was just doing this to get back at the Harpers. And I get why they'd think that. But it wasn't about them anymore. Not really. It was about fixing something that had quietly gotten out of balance. Election night came quicker than I expected. 47 votes total. I got 38 of them. And when the results were announced, there wasn't some big celebration. Just this quiet shift in the room, like everyone was waiting to see what I'd actually do with it. Daniel shook my hand. Tight grip. Short nod. No words. And just like that, it was mine now. The same system that had been used against me. The same rules. The same structure. Only now, I was the one sitting at the front of the room. And I'll be honest, for a moment, just a moment, I understood how easy it would be to let things stay exactly the way they were. Because power doesn't feel heavy when you first pick it up. It feels convenient. That feeling didn't last long, though. Because the moment you actually start looking at things from the other side of the table, you realize how much damage convenient can do if you let it sit too long. and I had seen exactly where that road leads. So I gave myself one rule. Right at the start, whatever I do, it has to hold up if someone else is sitting in this chair next year looking back at my decisions. If it only works because I'm the one in charge, then it's probably not the right move. Which sounds nice in theory, until you open the complaint records. That was the first thing I asked for. Full access to the last year of submissions, dates, addresses, timestamps, everything the system had logged. It took a couple days to get it all organized, and I remember sitting there late one night, scrolling through entries that all started to blur together. Lawn height, trash bins, decorations, parked cars, the same patterns over and over again. Then I noticed something. Not the complaints themselves, the metadata. Same submission times, same formatting quirks, and eventually, the same IP address. 54 complaints, all from one source. The Harpers. I just sat there for a minute, staring at the screen, not even surprised anymore, just confirmed. It wasn't a suspicion. It wasn't a theory. It was a system being used exactly how it was designed to be abused. The next board meeting was the first one I ran as president. Same room, same folding chairs, same stale coffee. But it felt different now, like the air had shifted just enough for people to notice. I didn't start with anything dramatic, just policy. First item, I said, we're updating the complaint process, effective immediately. All submissions must include name and address. No more anonymous reports. There was a pause, not resistance, just people processing it. Then a few nods. No one argued. Because when you say something out loud that everyone already knows is fair, it tends to stick. The second item was standard procedure, neighborhood inspection. Now, technically, every new president is supposed to do a full walkthrough, documenting visible violations, making sure enforcement is consistent across the board. In practice, it hadn't been done in years. So I did it. Not in one day. Over the course of a week, early mornings mostly, walking the same streets I'd lived on for years, but seeing them differently now, not as a neighbor, but as someone responsible for applying the rules evenly. And I meant evenly. Every house, every yard, including mine, which, for the record, passed. Barely, but it passed. When I got to the Harpers house, I didn't slow down, didn't linger, just noted what was there, same as I had for everyone else. Rusted mailbox, visible trash bins, faded exterior paint, cracks in the driveway, overgrown weeds along the fence line, a loose gutter hanging just enough to be noticeable. And yeah, a ceramic garden statue out front that, according to the guidelines, actually did require prior approval. 7 violations. Clear. Documented. No interpretation needed. I finished the inspection, compiled everything into reports, and sent out notices, same format for everyone, same timeline. 30 days to correct or fines would apply. No exceptions. A couple days later, there was a knock on my door. I already knew who it was. Elliot didn't wait for an invitation. The moment I opened the door, he stepped forward, holding the letter like it was evidence in a trial. "This is retaliation," he said, voice tight, controlled but just barely. I leaned against the doorframe, not blocking him, not inviting him in either. "It's an inspection report," I said. "You have 7 violations. We've lived here for months without a single issue," he snapped. "And now you have 7, I replied. Susan was standing a few steps behind him, arms crossed, watching me like she was trying to read something beneath the surface. Not angry, just calculating. "You're targeting us," she said. I shook my head. "I inspected every house in this neighborhood. Yours isn't special." Elliot let out a short laugh, but there was no humor in it. "This is because of the complaints." "No," I said, meeting his eyes. "This is because of the rules." That landed. You could see it. Because for the first time, the same system they had been using was now standing directly in front of them, neutral, documented, and not on their side. "You've got 30 days, I added, then stepped back and closed the door. They fixed 3 things. The easy ones, the trash bins, the weeds, the gutter. Everything else stayed exactly the same. Day 30 came and went. So I issued the fines. $50 per violation per week. For violations remaining, $200. The following week, same. Another $200. And again, no special notices, no warnings beyond what was already given. Just the process, applied exactly as written. By week 4, people had started noticing, not in a gossip way, just awareness. Because for the first time in a long time, enforcement was visible, consistent, predictable. By week 6, the Harpers had racked up over $2,000 in fines. That's when the work crews showed up. Driveway repairs first, then painters, then someone hauling away that garden statue. I watched it all from my window, not with satisfaction exactly, but with a kind of quiet closure. Because it wasn't about watching them scramble. It was about seeing the system finally do what it was supposed to do. No favoritism, no anonymity, no quiet pressure from the shadows. Just rules, applied evenly. After that, things got quieter. No more random complaints. No more early morning patrols with binoculars. Elliot still sat on his porch sometimes, but without the notepad, just sitting. Susan waved once, a small, almost reluctant gesture. I waved back. Because here's the part that doesn't make for a great revenge story. I didn't actually hate them. Not really. I think they moved in, didn't feel in control of their new environment, and found a system that let them create that control, one complaint at a time. And for a while it worked. Until it didn't. The neighborhood feels different now. Not perfect, still has its moments. But there's a balance that wasn't there before. People speak up more, meetings actually have discussions, decisions get questioned. And me? I still sit at that same kitchen table sometimes, same spot where I measured my grass like an idiot, and I think about how close I came to just ignoring all of it. Because that would have been easier. But it wouldn't have fixed anything. Now here's the part I'm still not completely sure about. Was what I did fair, or was it just a more organized version of the same thing they were doing? I followed the rules. Every single step. But I also knew exactly how those rules would hit them. And I didn't stop it. So I'll leave that to you. If you were in my place, would you have done the same thing, or would you have handled it differently? Drop your thoughts in the comments. I read more of them than I probably should. And if you've ever dealt with an HOA situation that made you question your sanity, hit like and subscribe. Because trust me, this kind of story happens way more often than people think.